It was a quiet weekend for Boston College players in the NFL draft as the remaining prospects were shut out. We're joined by Mitch Wolfe today to talk about what happened and where they go from here. All of this and more on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. Happy Monday, everyone. It's the post NFL draft hangover, and who better to nurse that hangover with than Mitch Wolfe? Mitch, how's it going?
It's going good. Like you said, a little bit of a disappointing weekend for the Boston College prospects. I was pretty surprised, honestly, with some of the results, but we'll get into all that and more.
So the biggest surprise this weekend, we'll just kind of go over the news. So first of all, quickly, Zion Johnson, he goes 17th overall on Thursday. And then after that, it is radio silence as over 250-ish other prospects are drafted with no BC players selected. Now, the first name that popped that was a big question mark about why he wasn't drafted was Alec Lindstrom. Now, Lindstrom was a center for Boston College, played, pretty well for multiple years for the Eagles. He was projected by many mock drafts as a third or fourth round grade center and then fell off. Mitch, what do you think happened there?
Honestly, I was really surprised. And a lot of people I follow, were putting together their lists of, best available UDFAs. And Lindstrom was very frequently near the top of those lists. So I think everybody was pretty surprised by it. And I mean, like you said, if you look at Lindstrom's profile, like multiple year starter, has experience in different schemes, has NFL bloodlines, good athletic testing. It's bewildering that he didn't get drafted. And, a number of centers went, it was a relatively weak center class. So that was partially expected, but, even I kind of cooled on my love for Lindstrom as a prospect kind of as the process went on, because I felt that he was relatively scheme limited. Like he would really only be able to go to teams that ran outside zone heavy offenses due to his lack of weight. But even so, going undrafted, I thought was very far out of the realm of possibility for me. Like I figured, it's like somebody will take him like in the 5th or the 6th at some point. But yeah, I mean, I think there were only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, only like 7 or 8 centers drafted. So, but him not being one of them still, I'm not sure I'll ever really understand why. I'll have to see if I can talk to some people about maybe there's some reason that I'm not seeing or didn't know about. But I mean, as far as I know, he was healthy, so it can't be that. So yeah, it was a very surprising.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, I don't know if it was you I was talking to, but someone said conservatively, he was in like the top 6 of centers. Yeah, I think there was 7 drafted. So it was kind of odd.
Yeah. And like one of them, so like one that came on late was Zach Tom out of Wake Forest, and he's played every position for them. Like he's played both tackles, he's played guard, he's played center. So that I got was that he was kind of one of the last guys. But after that, there was a pretty big drop off. Like Dawson Deaton from Texas Tech got drafted, and that kind of surprised me. But he's 6'5" and over 305 pounds. So, that size makes sense. But yeah, no other centers, which, and even some I liked. Oh, sorry. Doug Kramer from Illinois got drafted. Luke Wattenberg from Washington, which Wattenberg for me has a lot of the same concerns as Lindstrom. He has played multiple positions though, but he's 6'4", 293. So a lot of the same issues. Doug Kramer out of Illinois, kind of, I would say pretty similar to Lindstrom, just, relatively undersized center. But yeah, like I wouldn't have bet any money on Doug Kramer being drafted and Alec Lindstrom not being drafted. So that was, pretty confusing. And I'm looking at Lance Zierlein's analysis on NFL.com, and he's one of their head draft analysts, does a lot of their report writing, and he has Lindstrom as a projected 6 or 7 round pick. And the thing with round 6 and 7 is that they go a little wonky because teams they might have like players that are weird and people haven't heard of, but teams want to get their hands on guys that they're worried they won't be able to get them in the UDFA portion. So like my Steelers did this multiple times, taking guys that, were kind of off the rails, but it's like, well, they were worried that they wouldn't be able to secure them as UDFAs, or they just wanted to ensure that they get them. So they maybe overdraft them a bit, but at the end of the day, 6 and 7 round picks just aren't that valuable.
So at the end on Saturday night, the UDFAs, we're going to kind of go player by player here. The UDFAs start rolling in, and Alec Lindstrom was one of the first announced, and he was signed by the Dallas Cowboys What do you think of his odds to make that roster and his fit there?
I like his odds to make the roster for sure. He's an immediate backup center. Again, lots of experience. They're more of they run a pretty diverse running game, so he should be able to survive. But I mean, Tyler Biadasz is their starter, and behind him is Matt Farniok, who was a draft pick last year out of Nebraska, who I didn't think was very good. He had his moments, but I think I don't think he's actually not a natural center. He's a guard, so they're trying to cross train him. So if you bring in Lindstrom, he gives you that immediate center experience. And so there's the other, I guess, quote, backup would be Connor McGovern, who right now is the backup left guard, could start left guard, but he has center experience as well. So honestly, like, I would not be shocked at all to see Lindstrom make this roster as a UDFA, as basically the primary backup center to Tyler Biadasz.
Wow. So that's a good fit for him. And I'm sure he probably had a lot of options there, leaving, the draft pool. So the second player to talk about, I think after Lindstrom, we both were on the bandwagon of BC not having anyone else probably getting drafted. And that's exactly what happened. But the next name to pop up was Isaiah Graham Mobley, a linebacker transfer from Temple. Mitch and I had talked about it. Mitch said, a solid player, but with injuries and doesn't do anything super spectacular. He is heading to Carolina to join the Panthers. But talk a little bit about, any last thoughts on Isaiah Graham Mobley?
Yeah. So I said this to you that, I don't mean this to be insulting, but like, he's a relatively mediocre linebacker. Like you said, like, doesn't have any great physical or, any great physical traits or anything. Like, he's a solid athlete. He plays decently well, but nothing's really going to pop off at you. And then he has a very long injury list. So that's going to take you off a lot of teams' boards. We saw players like Justin Ross and Carson Strong who have, much more severe long-term injuries, but they didn't get drafted either. And I don't think Graham Mobley's issues are that bad, but you can see it's like, all right, if there's these injury risks, I don't want to take that chance on a player. There's honestly, this team, looking at their depth chart, they did draft a linebacker. So they drafted Brandon Smith, who is an athletic freak out of Penn State. He doesn't exactly know how to play football still, but he's 6'3", 250 and runs like a 4.3, 540. So, you get crazy athletes like that. Other than that, though, they don't have a ton of linebacker depth behind their few starters. So, I think he has a decent chance of making the practice squad if he can stay healthy and play well in the preseason. So again, I don't know if he'll make the active roster, but I think he has a good chance of making the Panthers practice squad. And maybe if somebody else gets hurt, he gets the call up and can be a contributor on special teams for them.
All right. In just a moment, Mitch and I are going to go down the list of all the other players, because there's some interesting ones to talk about and some interesting landing spots for a few BC players. But summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Throw them in your bags and your kid's backpack. Make sure everyone has a bar so you're fueled for your summer adventures. I literally was leaving today to go to a dinosaur exhibit with my wife and my kids. And my wife went and grabbed a Built Bar. And she said to me, Built Bars are great for mothers that don't have time to eat. And it was a perfect fit for her. She grabbed a Built Bar and it gave her the nutrition to make it through a long little museum trip that we did. But the best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both. And it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. And they're 100% covered in chocolate. That means they are delicious. And if you tried the puffs yet, I've been talking about puffs for a while. We're going crazy for the puffs here on the Locked On Network. There are some great flavors, including banana cream pie, churro, and others that you need to check out. Now head on over to Built.com and check out all the delicious flavors that they got going on there. Change every single day. Right now they got banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and so many more. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and you're going to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. We are, if this is your first time checking this out, Locked On Boston College is a daily Boston College podcast. We're the only one in the game that does this. We do a 20 to 30 minute episode every single day. You're not going to find this anywhere else. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to get your Boston College news. We do opinions, analysis. We have guests. We had Christian Mahogany on last week. We had Zay Flowers on 2 weeks ago. I've had Sean Marshall, you name it. I've been trying to get them on the show. So there's going to be a fun summer coming up, and we're going to have a lot of fun here on Locked On Boston College. So Mitch is here with us today. This is Mondays with Mitch. Mitch is a fantastic base of knowledge of football and from a scouting perspective. And we're talking about all the Boston College players that didn't hear their name called. And let's go through some that did continue to find some success after the draft. And there were names that we were kind of expecting to not get drafted. But let's talk about the two offensive linemen, Ben Petrula and Tyler Vrable.
Yeah, so Ben Petrula ended up with the Cleveland Browns. And I think that he has a bit of an uphill battle to make the roster. But I think that this is a really good scheme fit for him. The Browns are even, depending on what their quarterback situation is exactly, they're going to be a very run heavy team. They do like to do a lot of man gap power running, and that fits Petrula very well. They're relatively thin, or actually, I don't know. It's tough to say. They have a lot of guys in there in terms of just they have a lot of bodies, but I feel like if he has a good camp, stays healthy, plays well in the preseason, he could beat some of these guys out. And the calling card with Petrula is versatility. Like, he has played full seasons at every position. He's played tackle, he's played center, he's played guard. So that's very valuable for a guy that you're at the back end of your roster. You want a guy that can come in if anybody gets hurt and, be a serviceable player. So I think that makes him very valuable. They already have a few guys like that on the roster already. So that's kind of the uphill battle portion. They have guys with that versatility. They also just like I mentioned earlier, they drafted a center. So, that kind of takes them out of the running there. So and that's the other thing, is like, maybe not for the Browns, but if he has a good preseason and doesn't make their roster, he could end up somewhere else and maybe on their practice squad for a team that isn't as deep at offensive line. So, I didn't love Petrula as a tackle at the NFL level, but I think he has a decently good chance to make it as a guard in the NFL.
All right. And now Tyler Vrable, obviously the whole story about him being the son of Mike Vrable and, he was roommates with Zion Johnson. Going into this draft, the big story with him, other than his dad, was his injuries. This was a kid that had good skill set, but just couldn't stay healthy. And he ends up going undrafted, but he's going a year behind Matt Ryan to the Atlanta Falcons. What do you think about Vrable to the Falcons?
Yeah, this fit makes sense from a narrative standpoint in that, Arthur Smith was the Titans offensive coordinator working under Mike Vrable for multiple years. So there's that connection there. They've obviously have interest in BC players. Chris Lindstrom is still there. And like you said, Matt Ryan just left. But in terms of his likelihood to make this team, they're obviously pretty set at their starters. I think they have decent backups. I'd be interested to see if maybe they give him a shot at guard. I'm not sure that's where he'd be best, but he might be better because he doesn't have the way he plays is he relies on his length too much, but his length isn't as great as he thinks it is, in my opinion. They did just draft a guard, so that's not great. I think that of the two, I think this would be a tougher sell for Vrable to make this team because he doesn't have that history of versatility. He's played both tackle positions, but he hasn't played a guard before. But he does have good athleticism. He still has some room to grow as a player, things to improve. So, but he has, I think he's at times displayed the tools to do that, just a matter of staying healthy. So, it's an uphill battle for both of these guys. I think I'd feel better about Petrula latching on there. But if he's healthy throughout the training camp and preseason process, I wouldn't be, floored if Vrable ended up making it on a practice squad first, probably the Falcons. Yeah.
I look at like the biggest, some of the success stories out of undrafted free agents. And one that I go back to, and it's not like a huge success, but it's a guy that's been in the league forever. And I keep looking to see that he's still there. And he always is Aaron Montero. Like he's floated between practice squads and regular squads off and on for about 8 years now, it feels like. And I believe he was an undrafted free agent. But just like a guy like him, like, he came in, wasn't completely polished, but then found a spot. And I know there's probably a million other stories like this, but that was just one BC name that I always go back to.
Yeah, and that could end up happening to Vrable or Petrula as well, is just kind of bouncing between the practice squad and active roster. And I like I said, I really think that would be more of the case for Petrula because he has that experience and versatility, whereas Vrable doesn't necessarily have that. But again, BC has been very productive at producing NFL offensive linemen. So I feel like these two would be, decently smart bets. And if you're kind of picking UDFAs to make the active roster.
So I had to ask the question, and I don't like ripping on kids for making choices. Do you think Vrable should have stayed in school or pulled the trigger and did what he did?
I think it's hard to say. I if he had come back and like stayed healthy for another year, I think he maybe could have gotten himself back into the draft. So yeah, it is always hard to say, especially like, we've talked about extensively how injuries were the problem. So, maybe he comes back and he gets hurt again, and then he's kind of where he is right now, but he's a year older and, it's kind of has less time to get better, improve himself. Whereas now, at least, he's a year ahead of schedule. He can ideally get healthy and, he's kind of just ready to move on and start his professional career.
All right. And then the last name that got an UDFA deal was cornerback Brandon Sebastian, who's joining Zion Johnson with the Chargers. What are your thoughts on Sebastian and that squad?
This is interesting because the Chargers invested 3 draft picks at defensive back, 1 as a safety, 1 as a slot corner, and 1 at more traditional corner. But I could see him making this roster because, again, like he has a lot of experience. He has good ball skills, good instincts. And, you always you can always use more corners. It's a very valuable position, especially with a team like the Chargers, that it's going to be deploying a lot of nickel and dime defenses. Sebastian is an extremely smart player. So I think that they'll value that in addition. So, I'm looking at their depth chart now. They have, 5, 6, 8, like 8 corners right now or 7 corners on the roster. So it's possible I could see him making the cut here. And, I think practice squad is definitely on the table. And if he made the active roster, I would not be shocked at all. I think that Sebastian, like we said a few weeks ago, like his pro day was a little bit of a disappointment in terms of athletic testing, but not to the point of it being catastrophic where it, completely took him off people's boards.
So I apologize. I made a horrible joke and it's on mute, so I don't even know if I should.
No.
I was going to say, speaking of catastrophic pro days, let's talk about Trey Berry.
Oh yeah. I didn't, did I miss it, or did he end up somewhere?
He did not. So
okay.
I'll just kind of run down the list of the other guys and what's going on with them so far. So Trey Berry, Travis Levy, there's been no buzz as of recording around 8:30 Eastern time on either of those guys. Guys that I have heard but haven't seen confirmation. I think they're getting preseason workout invites is Mike Palmer to the Saints and Brandon Barlow to the Chiefs. And so I think that's pretty much everybody. I might be missing somebody, but Grant Carlson, he's not going anywhere. No offense. Punters are just, hard to find. And as we saw with Matt Ariza, the league is a little bit stingy right now with finding spots for them. So I think that kind of wraps up all our draft discussion. Now, my last thought, I've seen people saying, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Is this having one player drafted an indictment on BC coaching? Because I've heard people ripping BC and the staff for their evaluations of players.
I don't think that means anything. I think that just, I think the Lindstrom thing was very surprising, but, as quickly as he was picked up, it's clear that he is, an NFL player. And like I said, I think he has a good chance of making the roster and being a valuable contributor for the Dallas Cowboys. I think that, the number of players that get drafted from a team, I don't think I think there's, when you're at the highest levels of college football and you're fighting between like the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons of the world, I think then it matters a little bit. But to compare BC to those programs is just not fair. Like there's no point in making that comparison. There's nothing to learn or glean from it. So, I think that it was disappointing that that BC didn't have as many players get drafted. But I think that, regardless of if they were drafted or not, I think they still have a good chance of ending up in the NFL, which is at the end of the day, doesn't necessarily matter if you get drafted or where you get drafted. It's like, are you on an active roster? Or are you playing in the NFL? Not necessarily were you a 7th round pick or were you a UDFA?
All right. In just a moment, Mitch, I have a question I didn't even ask you off the air. In my final segment, we're going to talk about Jordan Addison and this NIL deal. Mitch, you want to sit on this one?
Yeah, sure.
All right. And we'll be back in just a moment. Now, BetOnline is the number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. For me, it's been Red Sox in the under for a while now, and I've been hitting all week long. So head on over to BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. This is Locked On Boston College. This is a big football episode, but one of the big stories this weekend was obviously there was the NFL draft. That was big, but also the NIL deals are starting to hit the waves, and we're starting to hear more and more about different stories that have been popping up. Isaiah Wong, a guard for Miami, reportedly was going to hit the transfer portal unless they upped his NIL money. He later rescinded that. It sounds like Miami found some more money for him because they've got a really rich donor that was able to do that. But that story was dwarfed by the story of Jordan Addison, the Biletnikoff winner, top wide receiver in the country for the Pitt Panthers, who is reportedly going to enter the transfer portal because he's in line to make, reportedly again, about $3.5 million in an NIL deal from USC to join Lincoln Riley. Now, this is a huge story. There's also stories out there that Pat Narduzzi had multiple phone calls screaming and yelling at Lincoln Riley. And it really puts up this whole conversation of NIL and amateurism. But I've been going back and forth with Mitch on this, and I want to get our thoughts on this out there because I think Mitch probably has his point of view and I have mine too. Mitch, what do you think of this whole story?
I mean, I think this is, people, they're kind of like, oh, this is the trajectory of college football. And, people like Desmond Howard, like, oh, I don't like the way that this is going. And this is the NCAA's fault. This is the NCAA, allowed this. They said, okay, we're going to do NIL, and they didn't put any rules in place whatsoever. And now it's the Wild West, and it's a little crazy. It's great that players are getting paid. I don't love that, teams are kind of going around and tampering with other schools allegedly, but, the NCAA, I think, created the situation such that it was a unruled chaos, and then it would make the schools and the players look bad and basically say, oh, like the NCAA, like washed their hands of this. And they're saying, oh, no, you can't blame us. Like, this is what you all wanted. You wanted NIL. You wanted the players to get paid. Now look what's happening. So now they're going to say, oh, do you guys want to go back where we don't let anybody get paid? So I think there's been some talk about Jordan Addison coming back. Like, he's not locked into transferring. So it's a little crazy, but I think Jordan Addison is an excellent player, but I think this is it's wild.
Yeah, it's a crazy story because, I sent a tweet over to Mitch again that was he's going to make more than the Pittsburgh Steelers second round draft pick if the numbers are true, which, again, this is all behind the scenes. Now, I kind of agree with Mitch. Like, this is the NCAA's problem. This is something that they've created. And it almost seems like they almost did it on purpose, as he said, to kind of like watch it blow up in everyone's face, because it seems like certain things you could do to fix this. And one of them, as we were just saying, was tampering, right? Like, there needs to be some tightening up of that, because I think players do deserve to get paid. And if they are worth a certain amount of money, then heck yeah, let them get paid. They deserve it, right? They're the ones putting their body on the line. As we just talked about earlier, Justin Ross, how much money did he lose because he played for, his scholarship fee at Clemson, right? There's those stories go up and down college football every single year. And Ross is not the only person that this has happened to.
For what it's worth, Dabo probably would have benched him if he took an NIL deal. So
yeah, but you got to think like this has been, I mean, let's take off our rose colored sunglasses here for a second. Players have been paid for years. It's the elephant in the room. And if you don't want to talk about it, then that's what it is, right? Like, the elite players for years have always been paid by the big schools. That's
why Reggie Bush lost his Heisman.
Right. And you saw that with, was it Terrell Pryor or,
the Ohio State guys,
Chubb, like all these stupid things where these guys deserve to get paid for that stuff. Now it's all in the open, and some of it's gross. And some of it is, a little shady, and if the NCAA isn't going to sit there and do anything, this is what this league is going to become. And I'm always going to stick by the side of the players, because they're the ones out there risking their bodies every single day. And if they're worth it, which we see what the coaches are being paid. I mean, no one's yelling at Nick Saban for making $12 million a year to coach 12 football games. No one's yelling at Dabo Sweeney from building an amusement park on Clemson's campus. You know what I mean? Or whatever the hell they have there for a player center. Like, if the players can get that money, they should. But at the end of the day, right now, we're talking about Boston College. This kind of stuff, it's just a different shade of gray from what BC had to deal with all the other recruiting stuff like 20 years ago.
Yeah. And like, consider this, like, and this isn't the most, lucrative example, but Lance Leipold was hired away from Buffalo to coach Kansas on April 30th of 2021. That's basically the same. It's about 1 year exactly to when we got the Jordan Addison news. So, and nobody made a stink about him leaving Buffalo high and dry that late in the process. Now, granted, Kansas, it doesn't usually go that way because Kansas had a lot of really bad off the field stuff but again, like let's hold the schools to more accountability. Let's hold the NCAA to more accountability. Like, they are the organizations that are sticking out. They need to be better. They need to figure out ways to, make sure that things are being done the right way. And like you said, like, I promise you, like, the stuff that was being done before NIL was much shadier and much grimier than it is now. Like, now there's just a name you can put on it and people are, they have a boogeyman, they have a straw man to get mad at. But yeah, I mean, like, nobody gets mad at the coaches for leaving their players high and dry, like, at any point in the process. Like, they're like celebrate. And then, you've quotes like Dabo, like, talking himself in circles about how, he like simultaneously loves and hates the free market when it doesn't or does apply to him. And I mean, I have my, personal opinions of Dabo as a college football coach and a person, but like, he's just like one of the biggest hypocrites in college football right now, because he is trying to have his cake and eat it too by, saying, oh, like, I want to be paid, millions of dollars because I'm the best in my profession, but I will never, and I'll be dead before I let, these other players that I'm coaching do it and be held to the same standard.
Right. And I think credit to BC, like, I've seen people complaining again. I read the message boards, I read Twitter, and there's people that are saying BC's fallen behind on that. And I totally disagree. Okay. So BC is not getting, Arch Manning. They're not going to get, Caleb Williams, but they never were going to get him anyways. But they're getting,
like, you can't say they're falling behind. Like, they are behind, and there's no change in how behind they are. Like, yep. They're never going to be able to, pony up these millions of dollars to essentially just, go out and bounty hunt or, get mercenary players, essentially. Like, that's just not how it's going to be. Right.
And so you get the deals like we just talked about last week with Zay Flowers. Like, he got a BMW. Who doesn't have an NIL like consortium or like collaborative? Syracuse. That's a team that's falling behind. They have nothing there. And I've seen their writers and I'm talking about it. Like, it's a big deal that they are not doing anything. BC has stuff in place to help play. I mean, they've had speakers come in, they've had consultants talking to them. They have the New Balance stuff. They've got a whole bunch of other things that they're trying to do to jazz that up. So yeah, they're not going to get $3 million to pay, Arch Manning to come play for you, but you're going to get guys happy, like, I'm sure Zay's pretty happy with the way things are going right now. And I'm sure they're probably looking, and Brevin Galloway, he had a BMW too. Like, you're getting these deals in places. And I think at the end of the day, BC they're keeping themselves in the conversation.
There's also been, it's been a generally tumultuous time at BC with terms of like leadership changes, and like, they're still going through one at the AD position. And frankly, like, I think that in the short time that Pat Kraft was here, like, I thought he did a pretty solid job of, responding to that radical change in the NCAA's policy. And again, like, these aren't huge moves, but I think that these moves set BC up well and give them a strong foundation moving forward. Like, these moves alone by themselves are not, world changing, but it lays the groundwork. It clears the path for, greater growth in the future.
All right, Mitch, we're going to wrap things up on tomorrow's show. I'm going to get into some of the news from the weekend, including some recruiting and transfer updates you're going to want to hear about. Mitch, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE. I probably won't be tweeting as much, especially about draft stuff now that it's over. I'll be having some recaps of stuff that went on in the draft. And, honestly, like, now it's time to start looking at 2023. I've said this. I think I said it on last week's show, and I'll say it again. I tweeted out, BC is going to have 4 players go in the first 2 rounds next year. You can put money on that now.
All right. Yeah. And I was going to say next week, with Mitch on Monday, we're going to talk about the 2023 draft and get your thoughts on, thoughts on tape right now. So thanks, Mitch, for joining us. This is AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJ Black_BC. I'm also the editor and publisher of BCBulletin.com. You can check my work out there. You can check Mitch out there as well. Make sure you subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. Give us a 5-star review if you like it. It really does help. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all again soon.